I never thought I'd look my own mother and father in the eye and watch them beg for the very life they stripped away from me. But life has a funny way of coming full circle. Standing in that crowded, high-end downtown office, holding a legal document worth $100 million, I looked at the two people who had left me to starve on the streets with two newborn Bobbies, and I didn't feel an ounce of pity. They stood there, weeping, pleading, and reminding me that blood is thicker than water, while the cameras rolled and the lawyers watched in absolute silence. They honestly believed that after a decade of agonizing silence and cruel neglect, they could just walk back into my life and claim a piece of a fortune they did absolutely nothing to help me build. But I knew exactly what I was about to do, and as I picked up that pen, I made sure they knew they would never see a single dime of it. Was I wrong for completely cutting them out and giving away that massive fortune right in front of their faces? Or would you have done the exact same thing after what they did to me? To understand how a person can look at their own parents and feel absolutely nothing but cold indifference, you have to understand where this nightmare actually started. 10 years ago, I was 21 years old, naive, and completely in love with a man named Marcus. We had been together since high school, and he was my entire world. When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified, but Marcus held my hand, looked into my eyes, and told me we were going to be just fine. A few weeks later, during our first ultrasound, the doctor smiled and pointed at the screen, revealing not one but two tiny heartbeats. Twins. We were overwhelmed, but the joy was undeniable. We immediately went to tell my parents, thinking they would share in our excitement. My father, a deeply strict, traditional, and status-obsessed corporate executive, didn't smile. My mother, who cared more about what her country club friends thought than her own daughter's happiness, looked at my stomach with utter disgust. They told me that getting pregnant out of wedlock at 21 was an embarrassment to the family name, and that unless Marcus and I immediately got married in a lavish ceremony they approved of, they wanted nothing to do with it. Marcus, coming from a humble, lower-income background, felt the suffocating pressure immediately. My parents made sure to let him know every single day that he wasn't good enough, that he was ruining their daughter's future, and that he would never be able to provide for a family. The psychological warfare they waged on him was brutal, and sadly, it worked. Just 3 weeks before my due date, Marcus cracked under the pressure. I woke up one morning to find his side of the bed empty, his clothes gone, and a short, tear-stained note on the kitchen table saying he was sorry. But he wasn't cut out for this life and couldn't handle the crushing weight of expectation. He vanished, leaving me entirely alone, heavily pregnant, and completely broke. When I crawled back to my parents' house, sobbing and broken-hearted, begging for a place to stay just until the Bobbies were born, they didn't open their arms. They didn't even let me pass the front foyer. My father stood there, crossing his arms, and told me that I had made my bed and now I had to lie in it. He said they had warned me about Marcus, and since I chose him over their advice, I was no longer their responsibility. My mother wouldn't even look me in the eye. She just adjusted her diamond necklace and told me that having a single, abandoned mother living under their roof would ruin their social standing. They packed my childhood belongings into 3 plastic garbage bags, set them on the porch, and locked the front door in my face. I had less than $200 in my bank account, no job, no car, and I was days away from giving birth to twins. I ended up in a dingy, freezing women's shelter downtown. That is where Leo and Maya were born. Holding my beautiful, innocent Bobbies in a crowded shelter, listening to the coughing and crying of strangers around me, a switch flipped inside my brain. The sadness and heartbreak completely burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard core of pure determination. I promised my children right then and there that they would never, ever want for anything, and that I would build a kingdom for them out of the absolute nothingness we had been left with. The next 5 years were a blur of absolute exhaustion and relentless hustle. I worked 3 jobs just to afford a tiny, mold-infested studio apartment. I cleaned office buildings at night while carrying my Bobbies in a double sling against my chest, studying coding and software development textbooks on my phone during my 15-minute breaks. I barely slept more than 3 hours a night. I skipped meals so my kids could have formula and warm clothes. During all those years of agonizing struggle, my parents never called. They never checked to see if their grandchildren were alive. They blocked my number, changed their locks, and completely erased me from their lives as if I had never existed. But while they were busy attending charity galas and bragging about their wealth, I was quietly building something world-changing. I had noticed a massive, glaring flaw in the logistics and inventory software that the cleaning companies and local warehouses were using. It was clunky, outdated, and costing businesses thousands of dollars in lost time. Using the coding skills I had taught myself during those sleepless nights, I began developing a streamlined, automated logistics platform. I poured every spare second, every ounce of my remaining energy, into that software. I called it Nexus. By the time Leo and Maya turned 6, Nexus caught the attention of a major tech incubator. They offered me a modest seed investment, which allowed me to quit my cleaning jobs and focus entirely on the software. Within 2 years, Nexus exploded. It was picked up by major national retail chains, and suddenly, the girl who used to count pennies to buy milk was running a multi-million-dollar tech enterprise. I moved my kids into a beautiful, safe home with a massive backyard, hired the best tutors, and finally gave them the life I had promised. But the real turning point came last year, when a massive global conglomerate offered to acquire Nexus for a staggering $900 million. As the founder and majority shareholder, my personal payout after taxes and fees was just over $400 million. The news of the acquisition made major headlines in the business world, and my face was plastered all over financial magazines and news sites. And that, of course, is exactly when the ghosts of my past decided to materialize. Suddenly, my phone started blowing up with restricted numbers and unfamiliar emails. It started with my mother, who sent a long, rambling message about how much she had missed me, how she had cried herself to sleep every night wondering where I was, and how she had only acted out of tough love back then to make me stronger. Then came my father, who had the absolute audacity to call my corporate office, demanding to speak with his daughter, claiming he was incredibly proud of the business acumen he had passed down to me. They didn't care about me. They didn't care about Leo and Maya. They saw a headline with 9 zeros next to it, and their greed brought them running. They tried showing up at my house, but my security team turned them away. They tried cornering me at public events, but my assistants shielded me. They were desperate, and their desperation only grew when rumors began to circulate in the industry that I was planning a massive, unprecedented philanthropic move with a significant portion of my newly acquired wealth. So that is the exact situation I found myself in, and I knew I had to make a choice that would send a clear message once and for all. Before I tell you the absolute chaos that happened next in that boardroom, and how I dealt with my parents face-to-face, I want you to pause right here and comment below. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have given them a second chance, or would you have done exactly what I did? Let me know, because things are about to get incredibly intense. I decided to finally grant my parents the meeting they had been begging for, but I did it entirely on my own terms. I instructed my legal team to invite them to our main headquarters downtown for a special, private event where I would be executing some major financial distributions. They arrived dressed in their absolute best, smiling from ear to ear, looking smug and arrogant, clearly believing that their persistence had paid off, and they were about to walk away with a massive cut of my fortune. They walked into the large, glass-walled boardroom, which was packed with lawyers, executives, and a local news crew I had personally invited to document the day. When my mother saw me, she let out a dramatic gasp and rushed forward with open arms, crying out my name as if we were in some tragic romance movie. I didn't move. I simply raised my hand, stopping her dead in her tracks a few feet away from me. The smile instantly dropped from her face, and my father frowned, adjusting his expensive suit jacket. I took my seat at the head of the massive mahogany table, and they sat down across from me. My father cleared his throat, trying to adopt his old, commanding tone, and said that he was glad I had finally come to my senses, and that family should always stick together, especially now that we were all in the same social stratum. I looked at him, leaned forward, and asked him where that family sentiment was when I was shivering in a homeless shelter with 2 newborns. The room went completely silent. My mother began to stammer, saying that they had just wanted me to learn independence, and that it was a test to see if I could survive on my own. I laughed out loud, a cold, humorless sound that echoed off the glass walls. I told them that their test almost killed us, and that the only thing I learned from them was how to be ruthless. I then signaled to my lead attorney, who brought forward a thick, leather-bound folder. I opened it, revealing the legal paperwork for the creation of a brand new, independent charitable foundation. I looked directly at my parents and told them that I had decided to allocate a massive portion of my acquisition payout, exactly $100 million, to this new entity. I watched their eyes light up with pure, unadulterated greed. My father actually leaned forward, a predatory grin forming on his face, likely already calculating how he could get himself appointed to the board of directors or manage the funds. But before he could say a word, I turned to the news cameras and the microphone in front of me. I announced that this $100 million foundation was being created for the sole, explicit purpose of funding, housing, and providing legal and educational resources for young, abandoned single mothers and their children in our city. I stated that every single cent would go toward ensuring that no young woman would ever have to experience the cold, heartless abandonment that I experienced when the people who were supposed to love her turned their backs on her. My father's face turned a violent shade of crimson. My mother gasped, her jaw dropping open. My attorney then turned the final signature page toward me, handing me a heavy gold pen. My parents realized in that exact moment what was happening. They realized that this wasn't an invitation to share in my wealth. It was a public execution of their pride. My father stood up, slamming his hands on the table, completely forgetting the cameras were rolling. He screamed at me, calling me an ungrateful, spiteful brat, demanding to know how I could give away $100 million to complete strangers while my own flesh and blood received nothing. My mother started crying real tears this time, screeching that they were facing financial difficulties due to a bad downturn in my father's firm, and that they desperately needed my help. They begged, they screamed, they threw tantrums, completely humiliating themselves in front of the press and the legal community. I didn't say a single word in response. I simply looked my father dead in the eye, smiled smoothly, and signed my name on the dotted line, officially transferring the $100 million completely out of my personal reach and into the foundation forever. I stood up, buttoned my blazer, and looked down at the two broken, furious people across from me. I told them that they had abandoned me with nothing, so it was only fitting that they left my presence with the exact same amount. I walked out of the boardroom, leaving them to face the flashes of the news cameras and the security guards who promptly escorted them out of the building. In the aftermath of that day, my parents' reputation was utterly destroyed. The footage of their entitlement and explosive tantrums went viral, exposing them to the very high society circles they had sacrificed their own daughter to impress. They were ostracized, my father's business partners distanced themselves from him, and they are now forced to live a quiet, bitter life, knowing exactly how much they lost because of their own cruelty. Meanwhile, my foundation has already helped hundreds of young mothers get on their feet, and every time I look at Leo and Maya, I know that the cycle of pain stops with us. Looking back on everything, I realize that true revenge isn't about hurting the people who wronged you. It's about building a life so magnificent that their absence becomes their greatest punishment, and using your success to heal the parts of the world they tried to break. If this story resonated with you, and if you believe that standing up for yourself and your children is always the right choice, please hit that like button right now to show your support. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful, real-life stories just like this one, and definitely share your final thoughts on this whole crazy mess in the comments section below. I read every single one of them. Thank you so much for listening to my journey. Stay strong out there, and I'll see you all in the next story.